Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to How Do We Get Here? And again, we're just trying to make sure you guys are doing the best to make yourself as healthy as possible. Today's topic is going to be grief. I don't even need to talk about any stats or anything about grief because if you're listening to this and you're living and breathing, you had grief. You may not know it was grief. You may have thought it was something else, but it's grief. So, of course, I'm not going to talk to you about grief. You know who I bought. I got my girl, Miss Della.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back to the show. I appreciate being out here. Being interviewed and being able to talk about grief. I think everybody struggles with grief at one point or another. And so let's talk about it.
Yes, 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 because with the pandemic and everything and all and just in general, people go through it but they don't know what to do with it. Plus people don't even know what it is. So my first question to you, what is really grief?
That's a good question. So grief truly is an emotion, right? An emotional state that we all experience. You can struggle with, and it's the sense of loss that we have when something has been removed from our life. And that removal could be through death. It could be through the loss of a job, the loss of a friendship, the end of a relationship, things along those lines. So grief is an emotional state, but it's also very much tied to the loss of something in our day-to-day lives.
Okay, and you go through that all the time. You're right, relationships, your pet dog, friends. You're right. Everybody has goes through it, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I lost my goldfish. We all when we're little, we lose our goldfish. Goldfish only last what, maybe 15 minutes once you
It's
once,
very true.
once you get it, you put it in the bowl. By the time you put some of that stuff in there, it's like, oh my God, he floated on top. But my damn fish died.
Yeah.
So you're right. We start off early. It's like then you try to try to adjust to that. But I'm glad you said that because again, we all lose something. So I guess my next question is how long how long you got to go through this grief thing? How long is it supposed to last?
Mm. So I don't believe, I don't professionally believe or even personally believe that there is a length of time for grief because we like you were saying, like with a pet goldfish, in that moment, the feeling of grief can be so huge and impacts our day-to-day lives for a period of time. And then when we're, 57, we could remember the emotional attachment we had to that goldfish. And then the grief can kind of come back in the feeling somber and sad about it, but then also challenging ourselves to find the peace within that process. So before it becomes kind of a clinical concern, I would say on average 12 to 14 months
Okay.
because there are stages to grief. That initial shock, right? When
Hmm.
you're we're going to use goldfish when your pet goldfish or your loved one dies, or when you first lose that job or that relationship, you go into a state of shock.
Hmm.
But then there's the first stage when we're considering the cycles of grief from a clinical perspective, is denial,
Okay.
avoiding the reality that something has ended or someone is no longer with us. And then you may go through anger and experience some frustration with, even if you have a religious perspective or lens that you go through. You may get frustrated with God. Why did you take this person away from me? Why did you do this to me? But then also angry at the person that may have passed away, or the goldfish that has passed away, right? Why did you leave me? That's not right. That's all
Yeah.
of those emotions, the angry emotions. And then, so we went from denial to anger to even a state of depression, feeling sad, hopeless, crying spells where you're starting to realize the reality that that person is no longer with us. And so you go to a state of depression, and then you go to bargaining. For example, God, if you bring them back, I'll be okay. I'll do it differently next time. think of it like even with the end of a relationship, you try to, I'm going to be a better man or a woman. I'm going to be a better person. I'll do this differently. And then you may go to a state of acceptance. Okay, I had this job loss, my relationship ended, my loved one is no longer going to come back. And so what tends to happen is those stages of grief, the denial, the anger, the depression, the bargaining, and then the acceptance, they all get twisted around. And so you may
Oh
go from
Lord.
denial to acceptance, to then anger, to then bargaining, to denial again, to acceptance, and it all just kind of gets twisted around. And so there's no kind of linear process where you go through each stage and then poof, you're done. And that's why grief is almost a lifetime state or lifetime process of loss. You just sometimes get used to the loss no longer. I mean, you get used to the feeling of grief being with you every day.
Wow. God,
Mhm.
that kind of rolls into my my next question is like, how do you get over it? It's like
Mhm.
because again, for me, it starts with the goldfish,
Mhm.
because you're young, you go through that, and then you start to lose people early. And I'm using myself for an example. I lost like my favorite aunt when I was 7. I lost my grandmother when I was 14. And all these stages you were talking about as a 14-year-old, I was doing all that because I was,
Mhm.
I was pissed off at God. Like, why you did this to me?
Mhm.
I needed them. You know how important they were in my life. So, then you were, well, maybe should be better. Maybe if I was better,
Mhm.
please, if I'm better, can you bring them back? And then
Mhm.
you raise the cold reality of there's nothing you can do. They're gone. And then you got to put that in some sort of perspective of carrying on.
You're absolutely right. And all of those feelings at a young age and as we go through life, those feelings are real and those processes are real. It's a part of the human experience to grieve and to feel loss. We don't want to feel it, especially when there's a loved one that is close to us. And so when it comes to kind of the getting over the grief, I think it's a matter of being honest with ourselves and accepting the reality of the situation, but then honoring your feeling of grief and loss and the stage that you're in as it relates to that person no longer being with us. And so this is kind of your new normal. That loss is your new normal. And coming to a state of acceptance with there. So there's no one answer in how to kind of get over it. It's a matter of accepting your new normal.
And you know what? I tell you, Miss Della, that is a very true statement. And I find myself, especially with the pandemic and, when people start dying. And I was telling someone, I said, when you're going through this, you're never going to be the same again. Everything's temporary
Mm-hmm.
because the moment you kind of got over that particular issue, something else happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, and people are like, I can't take it. But I'm like, in reality, you have to.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're never going to be quote unquote normal again in the aspect of, oh, I'm going to be the same person when I first started. No, because as you go on, you'll lose people.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at older people, they are in the 80s and 90s, and I said to myself, you've seen a lot of death, you've seen a
Mm-hmm.
lot of changes,
Mm-hmm.
and you talk to some of them, they're kind of like, I'm the last of Mohican. I
Mm-hmm.
am last of, 10 kids or 2 kids,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I'm the only kid. But I've seen my parents pass. I've seen my grandparents pass. I've seen kids pass. So it's like you want to ask them, like, how do you survive? But there's a sense of calm with them because they're like, you know what? It's part of life. So I just have to adjust to it accordingly. It's not
Mm-hmm.
fair. And who the hell said life was fair? It's
Very
not
true.
fair. Because girl, I'm gonna tell you, I'll be honest, because we keep it real here. We keep it real, real. There's fucking times where I'm like, I love my grandmama. I love her. Why the
Mm-hmm.
fuck you took that goddamn son of a bitch over there? They ain't doing shit. Shit over there. Let me give you 10 for 1. You give her back to me, I give these 10 sorry motherfuckers so you can go ahead and take them and get her back to me. Because they ain't doing shit anyway. And you looking like, why do you still living? You still fucking here? It's like
Yes.
you do that, and it's just like, and that's a no. Is that a normal emotion
That
to
is
go through that?
yes, that is absolutely a normal feeling because we value people differently, and we could pick and choose our rathers, right? So wishing and kind of bargaining and getting upset and disappointed that your loved one was has passed away, and you wish not wish, but let's live in our truth. Sometimes we wish that somebody else was taken instead. Those are normal processes as you go through the stages of grief. And then you can maybe even feel some resentment towards people that are still with us over our loved one. Like you said, wishing that somebody else was chosen. That is, I say all that to say it's all very normal, very, very normal.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Now,
Mhm.
how do we support people who are grieving? Because sometimes you want to walk up to people. I'm gonna use this as an example. People,
Mhm.
if someone loses a kid, what you can't do is walk up to them and say, "I know how you're feeling."
Mm.
Unless you lost your kid, there's
Mhm.
no fucking way you can tell them, "I know how you feel."
Mhm.
So, but rather than say something like that, how do you support people?
How do you support people when someone has just lost a loved one? Is what you're asking? Okay.
Yes.
My biggest recommendation would walk up to that person or text that person and say, "Here, I'm here for you," and genuinely mean that you're there for that person. I'm here. I'm a phone call away. Let me know if you need anything. I think, especially during those initial couple of days or weeks afterwards, that person is in a state of shock. They just lost someone that is close to them, and so they're trying to power through and trying to organize the funeral services or whatever, whatever process they may be going through afterwards. And so follow up with that person, ask them if there's anything that they need, and then following up with whatever their needs are. Now, sometimes that could be financial, and we don't want to pass the hat and it's like I can't help you financially, but I can cook you a plate of food. And then actually, what I mean, cook them the plate of food or actually help them with the services. But in those initial moments, it's saying, I'm sorry for your loss, and being present with that person versus bringing your experiences into the situation. Allow them to feel their feelings without you bringing, like you said, hey, I know what that feels like. This was their child. This was their grandmother, their goldfish. And so you may have had a similar experience, and people do want to be surrounded with people who understand loss, but be present for their loss, and instead of bringing your loss into it as well, because then things get complicated. Because then, you know.
Yeah, you're right. And it's just like you just want to be you just want to be with them. You want to support
Mhm.
them in this
Mhm.
process. You don't want to, yeah, I remember when nobody, first of all, nobody want to hear that shit. People, nobody want to hear that shit. Be there for them. Be there, support them. Not for you
Mhm.
bring all your stuff in there. So just be mindful of that you're trying to help them go process this
Mhm.
this thing. Not
Mhm.
you, but them. Now,
Mhm.
the other question I got for you is I heard a term called grief triggers. Like
Mm.
I know you've heard about it. And I'm kind of thinking what it is, but I'm gonna use you as the guru of all that knows all about the mind and human emotions. What are grief triggers?
Actually, that is a really interesting term. It is similar to most other triggers where there is a moment, a person, place, thing, scent, smell, that triggers that memory of that loss to come back and feel real again, or feel as though it's happening in the now again. And so what we tend to do is try to avoid our triggers, and sometimes avoiding triggers leads to developing avoidance tactics, like, oh, I'm not going to go there anymore because it will trigger the memory of that person. And I think that that's okay for a little bit of time. But then it's also okay to go to that restaurant or wear that perfume or go to into the bedroom, and honor that memory or that experience that you had with that person there. So you can avoid in the beginning, that's normal. But then also kind of challenging ourselves to go back to these places that may be triggering us, or have these experiences again that may be triggering us from a healthier space. Once you've processed and unpacked what about that loss was triggering, then going there and honoring that person is also equally as healthy.
That's good to know because a lot of people, get stuck. And and I hate to use the term stuck, but it's almost like birthdays and anniversaries, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It's just like it's people always use this term, as time goes on, it gets better. What do you think about that when you hear that?
Mm.
Does it get better, or is it just you just become it becomes your new normal? You just say, okay, it is what it is.
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one for me. So I think that we get used to the new normal. The
Mm-hmm.
date comes around on the calendar. We remember the person that we lost, and hopefully we're remembering it from a good memory, but it's your new normal. So that's my thought on that. It's not that it gets easier. It's just that you have to we're forcing ourselves to kind of be in the now versus live in the past. And so we have to get used to today and not yesterday already passed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
That's good. I'm glad you said that because
Mhm.
I hear a lot of people, 30 years after someone passed, and they're like they still seem to be pulled back to that, and it's just like when you see it and you hear it, you just kind of be. I'm quiet because I just let
Mhm.
them express and let them talk because I'm not going to tell them like it's been 30 years. You should get over it. That's not
Mhm.
as that's not necessarily the case because you never know how close that person was, how
Mhm.
influential that person was. So you have to be mindful of that. So that's the important thing. Now
Yes.
the other part of that is
Mhm.
when does grief become unhealthy or dangerous to the person?
Mhm. Mhm. Where that person that may have passed away 30 some odd years ago is impacting your capacity for functioning today.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
so um, if that goldfish, I'm gonna go. We're gonna use the goldfish as an example. If that goldfish is stopping you from going to school, going to work, doing your projects, it's a complete utter distraction, or it's constantly on your mind. That loss after a few months, then yes, I think it's time to go to a therapist. And seek out additional mental health services, because then you're missing out on life today,
Hmm.
because you're in that state of grief.
Okay, well, that's
Mhm.
good. So listen, people, it gets to a point where if it's stopping you from getting out your bed every morning,
Mhm.
seek Miss Della's help. Seek her, look for her, find her. She'll help you. And I tell you the other thing. This question I had to ask because it. I don't know if you went through it. How do you? I'm gonna use Kobe as an example.
Mhm.
When I found Kobe Bryant died, it affected me like he was one of my brothers. Like he was
Mhm.
family. Like
Mhm.
When Michael Jackson died, like damn, Michael Jackson died or Prince
Mhm.
died. It's like why does it affect us so much when people who we don't really know personally
Yeah.
that when they die, it's like you go through your own grief. Because I know people when Kobe died, girl, it was like their brother died. I
Yeah.
saw people up there, with the pictures, and the saddest thing it was not only just him, but it was everybody who died on the plane. His daughter was with him, so it was just like,
Mhm.
uh, and it was right before the pandemic too. So it was like
Yes.
that was the first thing, and then the pandemic happened. So it was just like you was in this world of woe for years. So
Yes.
so how does that? Why do we feel like that with somebody that we don't even know personally dies?
That is true. I felt that when Kobe died. And mind you, I was never a big basketball player. I mean, basketball player, but basketball watcher at all either. But I remember being on vacation at that moment, turning my phone on and seeing that he had, passed away in the helicopter accident. And I think that it's because with celebrities in particular, well, no, with all people, it's that human side of us that knows loss and knows what it feels like to have to now embrace this new normal and live life differently, and how in Kobe's case, his wife and children were left behind, and the feeling that they'll have to go through, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that we feel for celebrities because we know what loss is. And it's really all about empathy, right? Sharing the human experience and treating people as human beings. And with certain celebrities, we feel a little bit more connected to because they've shared an important part of our lives. They made it out they made it out the hood too, and then now they're successful, and so they've inspired us in some way. They've planted a seed on our hearts that when they leave this earth, it's like, damn, I feel like I lost one of my cousins. I lost one of my uncles. I lost a loved one too. That person was close, even though we've never met them. In some way, they've had an impact on us, and so that's why we may also experience some sense of grief when they pass away too.
Okay, that girl, that explains it, because I swear I was hurt. I was just like, shit, I was in tears. I was like, God damn, I turned around. Everybody talked to my boys, called me, man, Kobe gone. I was like, I
Mhm.
know. And I'm like, man, I don't even want to talk to you because I'm going through my thing. Like, damn, I'm thinking about him, the other people on board, and the
Mhm.
families leave behind. And it's just like, again, we go back to life is not fair.
Yep.
You can't rationalize like, well, why Kobe? Why? But we don't think about every day someone dies.
Mhm.
Every day on the hour, every someone dies around the world. So
Mhm.
everyone is grief is constant. It's
Mhm.
almost like it's not like, oh, we go through this spell of grief and then it fades away. No, it's like every day someone is suffering throughout this world.
Mhm.
And that brings up my other question, which is like, how do you explain this to kids? Oh,
Yeah, the babies. How do
the
you
babies.
the babies. So life is so new for them, right? They
Yes.
probably have never gone through all the trials and tribulations until they get to adulthood. So it's really taking your time into being present with that child, explaining to them the difference between life and death. So that level of education there, right? But then
Hmm.
letting them know that it's okay to feel their feelings as well. And they go through their stages of grief, the bargaining, the anger, the depression, so on, and allowing that child to feel their feelings. So I would, if someone came into my office, I would say something to the effect of, and you have to use real words, adult words,
Yes.
and life and death, and so that they understand, and it can feel a little harsh, but using real words with children, I feel like is important. But explaining to them that their loved one has died, and death means that you will no longer have this person in your life. And it's okay to become upset about that, to cry. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to be mad, and throw a temper tantrum, but that person is no longer with us. We're going to go to this person's services, and the services are to honor that person's life while they were here. Um, and that could be for example, for some faith practices, it may be going to a wake, it may be going to a funeral, it may be having the individual cremated, and you may see an urn and explaining to the child what the urn is or what the casket is and things like that, so that they have a sense of this is real too. And then after the funeral, you may have people come to the home, and you'll have people saying, I'm sorry for your loss, but really taking the time to explain to the child what's going to happen next,
Hmm.
and letting them also feel their feelings and be upset. Do not try to force a child through their stages of grief, or tell a child to get over it. And to not be upset about the goldfish, but then also allow the child to have a funeral for the goldfish, or for the dog that passed away, or the cat that passed away. But walking them through in a real world, a real way, what is going to happen, and allowing them to feel their feelings too.
And that's true, because all I keep thinking was Rudy, the first episode of the Cosby Show, when Rudy said the funeral for the goldfish.
Mhm.
I was like, oh yeah, and they stand like, okay, what we gonna talk about the goldfish for? But she was little,
Mhm.
so again, that was her way of processing that the
And
fish is gone. So they had to go ahead and do
do
their little ceremony for it. So
And I think it's so important. I remember that episode. I think it's so important because now she learned that this is what death is. This is a part of the loss and grieving process, right? To have the funeral, to do the eulogy, to go through this so that she'll be prepared when she gets into adulthood and what the process is. She won't be as taken aback or shocked by the process of burying the loved one, right?
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. So people talk to your kids,
Mm-hmm.
just have a real conversation with them because that's going to influence the rest of their life. Because if you approach it, I don't want to say it's the wrong way. I can't. That's the term I'm using, wrong way. But if you approach it in such a way that they don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
then that could cause some issues down the road of loss because that influences relationships. Because then like, oh, if I love somebody so much, I'll lose them. So I
Mhm,
can't really love anybody that tight because the last
mhm,
time I loved somebody, they were gone. So you got
mhm,
to be real careful about that. Which of course runs into my next question: is how do you cope with the crisis of faith and purpose in loss? Because I can
mhm,
tell you firsthand
mhm,
that I was, y'all, I'm human. I was pissed off at God. I ain't gonna lie to you. I was fucking
mhm,
pissed off. I was just like, God damn.
mhm,
How's it gonna be a God who's a merciful God that loves everybody and all that? How you gonna put this hurt on me? What I do?
mhm,
Why? As we said before, why didn't take that person or this person or those group of people, but why you had to take this person who meant so much to me?
mhm.
And so, how do people cope with that? I mean, how do your purpose because it changes. It's like I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, yet they died.
So that's a part of the bargaining stage of grief, right? We're trying to rationalize the loss and bargain with God that if you bring this person back or if you take this hurt and pain away, then life will be easier for me or different for me, or I'll be able to continue on in my purpose and continue to be motivated. So that kind of bargaining back and forth about what to do next in life is a part of the stages of grief. Now, when you lose your sense of purpose, I think it's operating or giving yourself patience and or treating yourself with patience and treating yourself with grace to know that you'll find it again. You'll find it again. And it may be different because you are in a new normal now, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and so when a parent loses their child, and say it was their only child, then you may lose your title as a parent, and that is another wave of grief. Well, you don't
Wow.
lose your title as a parent, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
You're always a parent, but that child is not there, so it feels different for you. This is your new normal outside of this experience. So I feel like taking the time to be patient with yourself as you rediscover in your new normal since your loss.
Okay.
And that takes time. That takes self-exploration, a lot of self-love, a lot of self-care, and then a lot of honesty too. A lot of honesty. Sometimes we're motivated because of the person, instead of what's internal to us.
That is so true. I like again. We keep it real here. So when my grandma passed, it was weird because it was kind of like she wanted to tell me a whole bunch of things. I was young. I'm like, I'm gonna take it in. I don't know why she teach me all this
Mhm,
until she passed. And I was like, oh shit, that's why she was telling me. Because
mhm,
again, the older people always had a sense of I'm gonna tell you, I'm not gonna wait till you get to a certain age because I may not be here.
mhm,
So she gave all this information to me, and all I knew was for me, I had to be successful. I had
mhm,
to be successful. I couldn't let her down because if she was here, she expected me to be at a certain place. So that motivated me. That was the fire that told me I got to be successful. I have to be able to help people like she did and to be a better person. That's why I always say, people do better, be better, because there's things I saw her do. I was like, as a kid, I said, why would you help such and such? Why would you help that person? Why? they're always getting help. And she always said, baby, in this world, you never know when you'll be in that situation. You hope that somebody would help you in that situation.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, and I find myself now all those years, and she's been gone for over 40 years. It's always like it still comes back. It's still lessons that I remember and things that I remember. And I'm like, damn, she gave me a whole lot of information. I had a whole lot of stuff, tools in the toolbox that I never used until so
Mhm.
now I was like, damn, I'm really using it. So for me, I have to pass it on. So now that's why I'm like, I have to pass on the knowledge to other people because she passed on to me. It's like I'm obligated to pass on to
Yes.
other people and make everybody else's life better. And that's why I want to give you the information to make your life better. I want no excuses. I want no blaming someone. Look at yourself in the mirror and make those changes.
Mhm.
So and that goes back to my last question I ask you is I always had an issue with how the grief process happens and you go through the process and all of a sudden they drop you off at the church and they drop you off for repast and then chew, everybody gone.
Mhm.
There seems to be no follow-up. Like, man, somebody will call you, like maybe the funeral home, say, hey, you all right, you good? And
Mhm.
then after that, you don't hear from them because they got to move on because
Mhm.
it's their business. Other people start to move on. So at that point, would, would that be a good time to maybe talk to a therapist before you start to go down a certain road just to get an initial
Mhm.
analysis on where I go from here rather than to stumble and fumble all the way through it and go through all the other stuff you got to go through before you say, oh God, I need a therapist. So I guess
Mhm.
that's my like, should you just seek out a therapist right after that happens
Mhm.
or after the dust settle, I guess, to really kind of put
Mhm.
things back into place with your life.
Mm. I think that's a good question. When after a loss, when is it time to see a therapist? Um, I don't think that there is a perfect answer for the time frame that someone should begin therapy after someone has passed away. Sometimes we're in a state of shock and we just are trying to get through. We're just trying to get
Hmm.
through the services. We're not thinking about therapy at the funeral or at the moment of loss. I do think that as a community, we can do a better job following up with that person who has experienced the loss, which is why earlier I was saying actually show up, actually reach out, actually say, hey, how you doing, thinking about you, let me know if you need anything, and actually follow up with that person, swing by the house, drop off the plate of food, Cash App, Zelle, Venmo, whatever the case may be. But then also, if you're noticing that a loved one is starting to decline far more than you've ever seen them before, offering or mentioning, hey, maybe you should see a therapist. It's been a couple of months now since your loved one passed away. You still seem to be struggling with that loss. They may be experiencing some numbness, some hopelessness, even having dreams about the person, um, both good and bad dreams about the person. But now they're not going to work, they're not going to school, they're not bathing, they're not eating as much. They lost their sense of self. But in that first couple of weeks, some of what you see is normal. However, if it lasts months upon months, then making sure to drop that hint. Now, how do you avoid it lasting so long? There's no time frame to grief. There is none. Because again, you're going through a new normal and your life is forever changed. And sometimes the reality of that doesn't hit you um, until months later.
Wow. And
Mm,
that's very true because we see with the pandemic, people were dying like flies, and it was just like, how do you balance that emotion? And not only with the family, but just everybody associated with it. It was just, to be honest, I think we have not even touched the surface of getting over the pandemic. I think
mm,
people are still trying to wrap their minds around the devastation, the death, just
mm,
all of that changed. I mean, as a world, we just seem to be, everybody just seems to be off to me. And it's just,
mm,
I don't know. It could be a combination of things, but everybody just seems a little off since
mm,
before the pandemic. So, that's why for me, I had that as conversation because there's a lot of people dealing with it, and they just don't know how to deal with it. And we're just trying to give people the tools necessary to move forward in life, because you have to move forward in spite of how death is, and you lose someone who's precious in your life. The one thing you guys have to understand, they did not want you to die with them. They
Mm-hmm.
did not want you to stop living their life or
Mm-hmm.
your life because they passed.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that they didn't say lay beside the casket with them, because they're gone. Their journey has ended, but you'll have to continue because you have things you have to do. There's a purpose for your life. You have to find that purpose and live that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is why I got Miss Della here to explain with all her wisdom and everything on how to do these things. Miss Della, how can our peoples get in touch with you?
So I am still offering individual counseling and family counseling at August Rose Health Center in Glen Burnie, Maryland. I am only licensed in Maryland. So if you live in the state of Maryland, then you can reach me again at www.augustroshealthcenter.com to schedule an appointment, or you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook, or give us a call at 410-412-7791.
Thank you. And listen, people, I'm putting all that information on this, so you're gonna have it. So yeah, she told you, but we're putting all this so you can reach out to her, because she will save your life. She will, trust me, she will save your life. So again, we just want everybody to do better. Just be
Mhm.
better, get healthier, and understand this is a new normal. Again,
Mhm.
and every time these things happen, it becomes a new normal. So
Mhm.
you can't really set anything in stone that this is how my life's going to be. That's just not how it is. It's not
Mhm.
reality. So that's why we want to give you this information to use and distribute, and keep looking it over and everything, and reach out to Miss Della. She's going to save you. Trust me, she's going to save you. So with that, I'm going to end this episode of How Do We Get Here? And listen, people, you know what you got to do. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the little bell so you can get the newest podcast when it comes out. And with that, take care, be better, and stay safe. Peace.